to Art Dust with Glenda Gibson and
Donna Drouin,
Donna
and
Drouin.
our amazing friend Chris.
And I
Hello.
thought you were looking at the flowers. And
Oh,
our
it's me. He's
amazing
over
friend
here.
Chris, yes, Chris John Otto, our who's American. You'll work that out from his accent in a
Is-
minute when we let him talk. But we were reminiscing about how we met Chris, and Chris reckons it's about 9 years ago. And Donna read his book, Art's
Yes.
the Rising. And in the back of that book,
An army arising.
That's the one.
yes. So if you are on YouTube, Chris just showed you the copy of that, and
Buy my book.
it's in a way it's still my favorite
Subliminal.
book. He's done such a lot of good books. So Chris
Yeah.
is an author, but he's lots of other things. But we're interviewing him today as an author. But yes, so Donna read his book, and in the back it says, if you want to make contact with me for any reason, here's my email or whatever it was. And Donna contacted him and invited him over to speak at the little retreats that Donna and I were running from America, to our little tiny retreats that we run in the Midlands.
Yeah.
And he said yes. We said, we can't pay you, we can't do this, can't do that, but we'll feed you and give you a bed. And he
Yes.
said yes. I think he was in a phase of his life where saying yes was mandatory.
It was actually, it was
You're
mandatory.
like, oh no, I can't say no to this person.
No, it wasn't like that at all. No, it's quite lovely actually. It was a dream come true.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah,
contacted
well.
our friends, and they all went, "Oh yeah, we'll join in." And then they also, we had him ferried all over the UK in about 2 weeks, and then he was back
It
home
just
again.
about killed me. I think I spoke in 12 places in 10 days. And the last day I was so tired I couldn't make a sentence. And then I went off to Germany from there.
Yeah.
It
Well,
was a whirlwind
It
tour.
was. And then he
10
came
years
back.
on, 10 years on, he's a bit wiser and doesn't
Yeah.
quite do that anymore.
Mm.
I don't do any, it seems like I don't do any speaking now. So other
So
than on Sundays.
before we leap into talking about the books, in particular your most recent book, tell us a bit more about you, because you're such an interesting character. Give us a bit more about
My quick bio.
Yeah.
In 2006, God spoke to me and told me I was working as an artist full time. And God told me to quit my job. And I said, hey, I have a great gig. And I'm an artist and I have insurance. And, that right there is huge. And so I said, God, no, I'm not quitting my job. So I went to work that day and they fired me. And that
Oh God.
began the journey I'm on now, which is that I completely live by faith. We don't do any fundraising. I just tell the story. The only people who know about my real needs are my inner circle prayer team and a few close friends, but I don't publicize my needs. We don't do any fundraising. And my mission since 2006 is to raise up an army of artists who will build Jesus a throne in the earth. And we started out with 3 people, and we're hovering just around 900 right now. So that's a triumph. And I send out an email every Friday. I'm on Substack doing that now. And our community is called Belonging House. And I've written 12 books now for artists.
Wow.
So there you go. Is that enough?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's enough. Yeah, as I said, I really loved an army arising, and there's some particular things in there I love. It was the vision you had of heaven,
Mm.
and the circles of people dancing, and your description of that was just
Well, that was how the calling came to work with artists. I was in my living room and God sent an angel into my living room and he took me to heaven. And I saw circles of people who were all holding hands, and they looked like they were all wearing the same clothes, but they were all doing the same dance. They were dancing. millions of people.
Yeah.
And then the Lord took me close, and I realized that they were all wearing their own clothes and they were all doing their own dance, but they were still holding hands. And it just was such an image that I've never, it's messed with my head a bit. But how much God's called us to hold on to each other, but not be conformed to one another. And so it's been interesting. And, a big piece of that was the Lord said, in heaven, there was a gold brick for me. And he showed me the paving of heaven, and it was all gold bricks. He said, all you need is a brick. And so God has provided for us in incredible ways, but still waiting for the gold brick. So, but the Lord has provided, like in unbelievable ways just since then. Yeah.
You had the loo roll thing.
The loo roll, yes. So in 2005, God began providing my loo roll, or as I would say in the US, toilet paper. Began in 2005 and continued until 2018, so 13 years.
Wow.
God provided all of my loo roll, and we lost count at 500 rolls. And it was really teaching me how he would supply every need.
Yeah.
And the scariest, there was a season where I had one roll at a time, where one would run out and then another would be provided. But yeah, people used to bring me rolls of loo roll for when they came to my house for dinner parties and things. It was bizarre. People who didn't know, they said, normally I would bring a bottle of wine, but God told me to bring you this, and they'd be a 4-pack of toilet paper. I said, yeah, that's fine. Thank you. Be a good host.
Yeah.
I love that you're telling the story. I mean, that's what God told you to do, didn't it? To tell the story.
Tell the story.
And An Army Arising is the story of the beginning, but it's not the only story. The story of how he's providing is just amazing. That'll be a book one day. At the moment, it's just a what is that? An email out to people or something. I don't know where.
I do send out an email on Fridays that I mentioned already, and then I have another Substack, and then I keep what I call the provision journal, and periodically I'll share with people the ways God has provided. Most recently, the door opened into an office in Chelsea in London. Been praying for a place for me to land in London, and by just a matter of kind of a comedy of errors, I ended up looking at an office and not thinking I was going to get an office. And I said, well, God, if you want me to have this, I prayed what I thought was an impossible prayer, which was, God, give me £6,000 if you want me to have this office. And the next morning, somebody sent me £6,000. So, and they had no idea. So, that's how God does it.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
I have a thing of God always gets me to where I need to be. I've I don't drive, but God always gets me to where I need to be. It always happens. It's just Well,
that's pretty good, because the Lord's been speaking to me about going to Rome, and this is the first time God's asked me to go someplace, and it's just not coming together. So that's encouraging to hear that God gets you everywhere you need to be. So I'm just going to trust that.
Yeah. Good. But in the right time.
In the right time.
In the right time. That's right.
Just be the right time.
Yeah.
So Chris, you've done lots of different art forms. Calligraphy.
Yes. That was what I did the most for a long time. This is my latest series of their little fish.
So this is 3 carps swimming around in the middle of a pond, for those who are listening.
So I've got a whole series of them. It's actually a design exercise.
Yeah.
That's lovely.
So Chris has done design. He's done flower arranging. I discovered when he came and helped me with some flower arranging for Donna's daughter's wedding.
Well, I was a personal assistant to an artist in her studio, and I did because of that. When you're that kind of person, you do everything.
Yeah. So he's done lots of art form. And famously, he did a little painting of some fires, lots of little fires springing up. And that was one of the things that really connected us very early on, because Donna also had done a picture of little fires everywhere, connected in her case by little rivers. But it was just these little fires all over. And at the time, Rachel Hickson and a lot of other prophets were talking about lights and sparks and things lighting up all over England. It wasn't any longer going to be a big central movement.
Right.
It's going to be little bits,
Lots of
all
little
over the
fires.
place. And connecting together, which was a big encouragement for us, because we've never been very big. But we have been a fire, and we have connected to lots of other fires. So so that was one of the paintings very early on that connected our hearts, I guess. So, Chris, you're a writer because God's told you to be a writer. Is that right?
It didn't quite happen that way. I quit my job and I didn't know what to do, and the Lord said to worship in the morning and write in the afternoon. I didn't have a laptop or anything. I went to the local coffee shop with a little notebook and a pencil. Whenever people say to me, "Oh, I want to be a writer," and I say, "Well, go get a notebook and a pencil and start writing," they always walk away disgusted because they want a big thing. I'm like, well, that's not how you become a writer. So I wrote in the coffee shop. That became, and then out of that grew the Friday email. God said to send out an email every once a week to all the people who were praying for me. So I started out with 6 people, and that's just continued to grow over the years. And I released my first book in 2009, but that was just really a book on how you need to write a book in order to learn how to write a book. And that's how I learned how to write a book. 2012, I started writing An Army Arising. And then that came out in early 2013. But the only reason I wrote that book was that I couldn't find another Christian book that was saying the things that I felt needed to be said. And so I said, I'm going to write into the void where no one is writing. Well, that's a big void, and I've been writing into that void for 14 years now. And writing books about things that nobody else is writing about that are really important. And how I think about it is that these are the big ideas that artists need to have in order to be disciples in the professional art world. So I don't write about how to be an artist. I don't write about marketing, although sometimes I do talk about these themes. I really write about your inner life, and I'm very deeply committed to the idea that your inner life determines your creative output. And so all the books kind of, people say, well, you talk a lot about discipleship. And in fact, more than one pastor has bought cases of my books to give to their entire congregation because they said these are the best books on discipleship I've found, which to me is a great compliment. But I want them to get into the hands of artists, so yeah.
I have to say, I really love Bezalel. I think Bezalel's one of my favorites. I know you've rewritten Bezalel though, haven't you? Yeah.
I've got every book but the new one. But yes, Bezalel. This is the first book in English written about Bezalel. There's another book that's a translation of a Spanish book that's a good book. But this is the most thorough book. And I just recently was challenged online by someone about it who said they'd been studying Bezalel for 30 years. And so I wrote back to them and was very gracious and just kind of talked about what was behind that book. They were so blown away. There's like, wow, you've gone way beyond me. So it's my homegrown PhD. I really love that book. So
yeah. You talked about it at one of our retreats before I read it, And that's where I got all the information. And it was just wave upon wave of you going into the Hebrew and the history and just rereading it, opening it up, talking about how much of the Bible is about Bezalel compared to, say, Solomon and other people like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And and just sort of reinforcing how important art is to God, you know.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I mean,
and because he's the first artist, of course, but yeah, it's such an important, and that is discipleship, really. It's knowing your identity. And so for artists to understand, I don't think we need to be on a pedestal and be the be all and end all, but we do need to know that we have something and we're important, because a lot of artists feel like, well, we're always told to get a real job, or
oh gosh, yeah,
that sort of dreadful thing. And it's still happening. I mean,
it is. And it seems like it's real
of millionaire artists. And I'm not just talking about David Hockney or one person here and there. I'm talking about Christians who are artists, who are millionaires. Like it happens. People.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, well, it's very interesting because that whole thing, get a real job, blah, 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 is reasserting itself. I thought it was going away, but there's been a backlash again. And, you know, so the work is never ended, it seems. And, you know, right now I'm talking a lot about how artists, you know, our calling is to be servants.
Yeah.
You know, in the past, prior to the late 19th century, artists were seen as a trade. This was a trade. And so you served a purpose. You didn't do, you know, there's a lot of talk about your artistic practice, you know, and that's just a self-centered thing, you know. If you're doing it for something larger than you, that's for a greater purpose, greater good. And I really try to instill this into Christians, and you know, because to be honest, I made my living as an artist. You know, that's what I did for a living, and I wasn't a starving artist. You know, I had a nice place. I ate well, I dressed nicely, and you know, it doesn't have to be this poverty thing.
Yeah. So so that's addressed really by Bezalel because of how generous people were, and because God moved their hearts to be generous.
Yeah.
So that not so Bezalel could be rich.
Bezalel.
Oh, well, however.
Hallelujah. Somebody came up to me in a grocery store one time and said, "Why did you write a book called Beelzebub?"
Well, I haven't quite got it that wrong. But yes, it wasn't to make him rich. It was to do the work of God. So God will provide all the things we need to do the work He wants us to do. Yeah. Work He wants to do. And He has provided for me, like you. Things have just been given to me. It's amazing.
Oh,
yeah. But anyway,
again and again. Yeah.
So you've written a few other books. I want to mention Drip, because I asked you a question and you wrote the book Drip.
Oh, that's true. You were the inspiration.
Yeah. So I asked Chris, so you talk about this throne we're building for Jesus on earth. What is that? What does that look like? And so he wrote Drip. And that book is free. So I'll make sure I put a link. Is it still free?
It's still free. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because I want to talk about that. How are we doing on time, Glenda?
We're fine.
Okay, good. Yeah, I had just sat down with my lawyer and had talked about, she said, "Will you promise me, cross your heart, hope to die, that you will not give away any more books? Because it diminishes the value of your writing." And so I said, "Yes, Sally, I promise I will not give away any more of my books. I promise you." She goes, "Great." So I'm walking across the Boston Common, and the Holy Spirit speaks to me and says, Chris, would you write a free book that you could give away on the internet? And I said, of course, Lord, if you want me to write a free book on the internet, I'll break my commitment to Sally. And he says, great. And just then it was like a download. I had my phone on the Boston Common, and I ended up writing the first chapter of that book on my phone in the middle of the Boston Common, just standing there out in the street. And then began writing it. And the interesting thing about it was that it came out of me not in kind of a prose format like I was used to writing, but in sort of a blank verse format. Mm. And I was able to arrange the text on the page in an interesting way. And someone said to me after they read it the first time that it sounded like the way I speak. It was in the rhythm of how I speak. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And it was sort of based on their two other books. One is called We Really Do Need Each Other by a man named Reuben Welch. I believe it was written in the 1970s. And that book was very influential on my life. And that book was written in an unusual style, like similar to that. And there was a French spiritual writer during the Charismatic Renewal named Michel Croix. And Michel Croix also wrote in that sort of style. So it wasn't new to me, but it was a new thing. And so all my books since then have been written that way.
Yeah.
And Drip, we estimate, because it's hard to measure these things.
Yeah.
Drip was downloaded by 10,000 people. So that was pretty amazing.
It is. I know I've sent it out to quite a lot of people, and it's quite funny. Some people have asked for it back, like, oh, I've accidentally deleted it. Could you send it to me? I said, yes, as long as you promise to send it to 3 new people.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that's happening, that's in the works in my life right now, is I'm going to be making all of my books, or making my materials, open source. So all of the PDF books will be downloadable for free for artists if they promise to share them with other people and to use the ideas and incorporate them into their work. And so hopefully later this autumn, we're hoping by American Thanksgiving to have that up and in place. So we're in the process of getting that ready. So open source, ideas worth stealing is the idea. And so it's what I began. So I've really gone, now I'm giving it away for sure, for real. So, but it's an exciting chapter. So, yeah.
Yeah, because you don't actually live off your writing, do you?
No, but nobody does. Hardly anybody lives off their writing,
That's right.
Barbara Cartland lived off her writing, but people like that. But I get an income stream from it, but it's not what I live on.
No.
It's helpful,
No.
but it's really about the ideas. I want people to read these ideas, because they're the big ideas that we need to be thinking about when we create.
Yeah.
So that's the thing. Yeah.
Yeah. So I do want you to talk about Artists at a Shift in Time, which is your latest book. Not that you're writing another one, but that's the latest published book. Yeah.
Right.
Tell us a bit about that one.
There's always a book in the chute somewhere. But Artists at a Shift in Time, I was going to revise An Army Arising. It was because some of it was dated. I wanted to revise An Army Arising and revise Bezalel. And so I started revising An Army Arising, and realized that so many of the things that I talked about in An Army Arising have already happened, or that book is a little dated, and I tried very hard to keep it from being dated, but it still was. And I felt like in that book, one of the big themes is that we're going through a 500-year shift. And since that book was written, we've passed the point of no return. And so that's what this book is about, a shift in time. And then I talk about the role of the artist and how artists are actually not ahead of their times. Artists actually understand the times they live in more than other people, and everyone else is really behind the times they live in. And I explain how that works, and then how we have to change our attitude as artists and get out of this art for art's sake mindset, that it's all about us and that we just need to do our own thing and then find someone to pay for it. And shift to, we are servants of others. It's not about me. We're the ones who are responsible for our culture and our civilization. And then I end the book with some models of things you can do. And the most important one out of that, back to the little fires, is helping people start small groups of artists who disciple one another. And I give some directions on how to do that. And that's what, is really where my heart is. So that people can go into places that really right now are closed to Christians. It's extraordinary how many institutions do not allow Christian input at this point. And they're actively removing Christians from them and removing Christian art. And so it's about how to be a Green Beret undercover agent, special forces for the kingdom in the arts. And so, that's sort of what the new book's about. And I'm really excited because it's going to be released as an audiobook within the next week or so.
Yeah.
And we'll be launching it, and it'll be available wherever audiobooks are sold, which is very exciting. And this book, Artists at a Shift in Time, actually has the broadest distribution of any of my books at this point. So you can buy this particular book anywhere you can buy a book. You can order it at any bookstore. So that's been really great. So that's Artists at a Shift in Time.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to sort of finish up now, but if you're listening to this on a podcast and you're not doing the YouTube listen, you won't know that Christ is wearing a clerical collar. And that is because he leads Belonging House. Belonging House is a church. It's a church without a building. Odd that it's got the name house in there, but it isn't about a physical house. And I'm not going to ask, there's a whole story behind that. But I'm just mentioning that Chris' heart is a pastoral heart towards the artists. And he leads this church, which meets via Zoom, I believe, online.
Yeah.
On a Sunday at 6 o'clock if you're in the UK. Other times, obviously, but it's an international church. It's a cross-cultural church. I mean, I know that Chris' Friday newsletter is translated into at least French because there's lots of, it's a worldwide thing that he does.
Yeah. We have reached the entire English-speaking world. So.
Yeah. So that's what else he does when he's not doing art and he's not doing writing. It's all linked together. It's all got one good purpose. So I'm going to ask you sort of a tricky question. It is this: what do you think your greatest achievement is so far?
My greatest achievement so far.
Something you're really proud of.
Something I'm really proud of. Well, it's not about stuff you do. The reason I started listening to God and doing what he told me was because I was in big trouble in a lot of ways in my life. And part of that was addiction. And the thing I'm proudest of is that I've learned to listen to God and do what he tells me. And it's changed my life. Yeah. And I don't do all of this stuff to make people like me or to sell books or to build a ministry. I do this because at the end of my life, I want to hear Jesus say, "Well done, good and faithful servant. I knew you." And in the last 18 years, I know that I know Jesus and he knows me, and we're friends. And I think that's what I'm proudest of. And when at the end of the day, I really want to see other people become friends of Jesus, just like I have. It's been a scary road at times, but everything else flows out of that. Everything else I do, everything else I write, everything else it's what I instill. What's very exciting to me is now seeing it being replicated, especially in the younger members of our community who are patterning their lives after my life. And to see the fruit of it is so exciting. But that's what I'm proudest of, for sure. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
truly beautiful. And actually, I think that's a really great point to end. So, yeah, thank you, Chris. Thank you for
My pleasure.
trusting
Thanks
the
for
crazy
being my
women
friend.
in New Zealand and coming on and talking to us.
Yes.
And yeah, thank you. It's really
You're
good
welcome.
to have you.
You're welcome.